No one in their wildest dreams could have foreseen that the man who once commanded boardrooms with a mere glance, who could silence a room full of venture capitalists with a single eloquent phrase, would one day be sleeping beneath a cold concrete awning, draped only in yesterday's news and the silent agony of a glorious past lost. That man was Alexander Ferris. When he entered a room, people noticed. It wasn't just his immaculately tailored suits or his disarming smile. It was his presence. He moved like a man who knew exactly where he was going, and everyone around him instinctively believed he would get there. His eyes, a deep and unshaken steel gray, carried the weight of vision, the calm of command, and the quiet burden of someone who had fought every inch of the way to the top. But even those eyes, as piercing as they were, held a hint of something else, something vulnerable, almost yearning. By the age of 37, Alexander had already done what most men dream about in silent moments but never dare attempt. He had built a logistics empire from scratch. No inheritance. No backdoor deals. Just an idea so simple and effective it stunned industry veterans, and an iron will that refused to bend under pressure. Born in the quiet countryside of Minas Gerais, Brazil, Alexander was the son of two underpaid public school teachers. Books were their greatest luxury, and education their only inheritance to their son. While other children played with toys, Alexander buried himself in atlases, market reports, and biographies of innovators. His mother used to say, "A brain filled with knowledge is the safest vault in the world." That stuck with him. When he left home, he carried nothing but a backpack full of dreams and a burning desire to prove that ideas could conquer circumstance. His academic record was impeccable, earning him scholarships, accolades, and eventually, a place at Harvard Business School. There, surrounded by the children of billionaires and global elites, Alexander never flinched. He spoke less, observed more, and learned relentlessly. While his peers competed for attention, he cultivated silence as a weapon. When he returned to Brazil, he didn't walk into an established corporation. Instead, he rented a dusty office above a bakery in São Paulo and started cold calling clients with a business plan, a spreadsheet, and a second-hand phone. In just 5 years, his company, Ferislog, grew into one of the fastest-scaling logistics firms in Latin America. What made him stand out wasn't just the efficiency of his routes or the precision of his forecasts, but his uncanny ability to predict market shifts and act before competitors even noticed the winds had changed. He built smart warehouses that learned from inventory patterns, created last-mile delivery algorithms before they were fashionable, and signed deals with major e-commerce platforms ahead of the curve. Investors adored him. Employees were loyal. The press named him the Iron Architect of Movement. He was invited to speak at global forums in Tokyo, Berlin, San Francisco, and Dubai. By all metrics, he was untouchable. Yet, despite his success, Alexander remained strangely solitary. He had admirers. He had a team that respected him and friends who enjoyed his company over a fine scotch or a strategy session. But no one ever really reached that inner room inside him, the one still marked by the simplicity of his upbringing, the one that longed not for applause, but for quiet companionship. For all the admiration he received, what he truly missed was connection. A partner. Not a trophy wife, not a business merger wrapped in flesh and flirtation, but someone who could match him in soul, in spirit, in silence. And then came Camila Duarte. She was mesmerizing, the kind of woman who knew exactly how to carry herself between power and poise. Her presence was like perfume in the air, subtle, lingering, unforgettable. She wasn't loud, but people noticed her. She didn't boast, but she radiated confidence. She was fluent in 3 languages, had lived in Paris, and worked in marketing for a multinational brand. Her intellect was sharp, her voice soft, and her laughter calculated. But it was her eyes that sealed it, eyes that seemed to understand Alexander before he even spoke. She listened to him in a way no one else had. Not as an investor or a mentee, not as a follower or critic, but as if she saw the man beneath the empire. That's what broke his defenses. They met at a tech summit in Lisbon, where Alexander had just finished a keynote on logistical disruption in developing markets. Camila, attending as a brand strategist, introduced herself at the cocktail reception afterward. Their first conversation lasted 2 hours. They debated trends, laughed at absurd pitches, shared family anecdotes, and drifted into an almost eerie synchronicity. For Alexander, it felt like finally meeting someone who could dance at his frequency. Someone who saw not the empire, but the man behind the curtain. Within months, they were inseparable. She moved into his penthouse. Their public appearances fueled headlines, Brazil's power couple of progress. Alexander had never felt lighter, more hopeful. Friends noticed a change in him. He smiled more. He canceled meetings to have lunch with Camila. He started talking about the future, not just professionally, but personally. He even mentioned kids. And when he proposed to her on a quiet beach in Buzios under a moonlit sky, there wasn't a single flicker of doubt in his mind. Their wedding was intimate but lavish. CEOs, ambassadors, artists, and childhood friends mingled in an old vineyard-turned-palace for the evening. Speeches were heartfelt. The vows were poetic. Camila, in her custom silk gown, looked like she had stepped out of a Renaissance painting. Alexander's eyes were wet with emotion as he looked at her, whispering to a close friend, "She's my peace in the chaos." But not everyone was convinced. Several of his old friends, especially João Carlos, his longtime business partner, had voiced concerns. "She's too polished," João warned one night, sipping his whiskey. "There's ambition in her smile. Be careful, Alex." But Alexander brushed it off. He believed in his instincts, and his heart, tired of navigating the transactional nature of his world, yearned to believe this was love. After all, he had always prided himself on reading people. He'd survived boardroom betrayals, hostile takeovers, government corruption, all because he trusted his gut. But Camila was a different kind of opponent. Not loud, not aggressive, just devastatingly methodical. She didn't confront, she caressed. She didn't demand, she suggested. And in those suggestions, beneath the silk and softness, hid the edge of a blade. Yet, in that moment, Alexander was blind. Blissfully, dangerously blind. And what he didn't yet realize was that the very woman he had brought into his heart, his home, and eventually into his empire, was about to burn it all down from the inside. The signs were subtle at first. Suggestions to merge departments. Harmless questions about board voting rights. "Wouldn't it be better if I had access to these reports, just in case? Why don't I accompany you to that negotiation? I could learn." Alexander saw it as love trying to understand his world. What he couldn't see was the silent weaving of a trap, one that had already begun to tighten around him. He was in love, she was in control, and the empire he had built brick by brick with intellect and resilience was about to become the stage for his greatest humiliation. Alexander used to believe that betrayal came with noise, slammed doors, angry voices, bold lies. What he didn't understand, until it was too late, was that the most dangerous betrayals come with silence, with a smile, with a kiss on the forehead just before they twist the knife. Camila didn't destroy his life in a day. She didn't need to. She was patient, calculated. She made him feel like he was in control while she slowly, meticulously, dismantled everything that made him strong. It began with board seats. Alexander had always maintained a tight grip on his company's executive decisions, but after the marriage, Camila insisted on being more involved. She convinced him it was about partnership. "We're building a life together, love. Shouldn't I know the ins and outs of what matters most to you?" He gave her a non-voting position on the board. Just a gesture. Symbolic. That's what he told himself. But symbolic turned to strategic when she began cultivating relationships with key investors and department heads. She hosted dinners, sent thoughtful gifts, remembered birthdays. People began to like her, respect her, even trust her. Alexander, meanwhile, was too busy. Then came the joint accounts, again, a gesture of unity. Camila suggested combining their financial assets. "It's just cleaner this way," she said, laughing softly as they signed the papers. "What's mine is yours, and what's yours is ours." He didn't see the clause she had inserted through her own legal counsel, quietly separating certain prenuptial protections and granting her increased control over liquid assets. By the time his lawyer noticed, it was already signed, filed, and too late. She began to challenge him in subtle ways during meetings. Not overtly, never in a way that seemed disrespectful, but enough to plant seeds of doubt among the board. "I wonder if we're expanding too quickly," she'd say with a thoughtful frown. "Alex is brilliant, but maybe we should review the last quarter more closely." Others echoed her. Her concerns seemed authentic. Her words always carried the cadence of someone looking out for the greater good. Slowly, Alexander's decisions began facing more pushback. His authority, once unquestioned, was now being negotiated. Still, he trusted her. He loved her. So when she asked for power of attorney over certain financial portfolios, just to help with the load while you travel, he signed. When she encouraged him to bring in a CFO of her choosing, he agreed. When she convinced him to take a break after years of relentless work, he finally listened. "You've earned it, meu amor," she said, pressing her lips to his cheek. "Let me hold the fort while you rest." He flew to Switzerland for a 2-month leadership summit. It was there, in a cold hotel suite overlooking Lake Geneva, that he received the call. João Carlos, his old friend and partner, was breathless. "Alex, get back. Something is wrong." By the time Alexander returned, everything was gone. His access to internal systems had been revoked. His keycards no longer worked. His emails were blocked. Camila had called an emergency board meeting in his absence, citing financial mismanagement, emotional instability, and patterns of erratic leadership. With forged documents, altered records, and carefully timed leaks, she portrayed him as a liability to the company's future. She even presented a video clip, spliced and edited, where Alexander, visibly exhausted and slightly inebriated during a private dinner, voiced doubts about holding it all together. She used his humanity as evidence of his incompetence. The board, swayed by months of subtle manipulation, voted him out. Unanimously. Camila, now chairwoman and interim CEO, released a press statement. It praised Alexander's contributions but said he had decided to pursue personal growth and new horizons. The media ran with it. Rumors swirled. Burnout, secret debts, emotional breakdowns. Alexander tried to fight back, to speak the truth. But Camila had anticipated that too. She froze his accounts. Froze his credit cards. Through quiet transactions and offshore accounts, she had siphoned off funds into unreachable trusts under her name. His apartment? Transferred. The cars? Gone. The company shares? Legally, no longer his. And when he tried to hire lawyers, he was met with silence. One by one, his legal allies withdrew. Conflicts of interest. Changed firms. Unreachable. He later learned Camila had bought their silence in advance. Within weeks, Alexander Ferraz, once the face of innovation in Latin America, was broke. Not figuratively. Literally. He had no home, no cash, and barely any clothes beyond what he packed for Switzerland. He slept in a hotel lobby for 3 nights, surviving on vending machine snacks. When they finally threw him out, he wandered the streets in a daze. Friends didn't return calls. Old colleagues looked at him with pity, confusion, or fear. He wasn't just a man who lost his company. He was a man who had been branded unstable, discredited in silence by the one person he trusted most. Worse than the financial ruin was the emotional devastation. The woman he had loved, the woman he had trusted with his secrets, his home, his heart, had done this to him. And not in anger, not in revenge, but in cold, calculated conquest. He replayed their conversations in his head over and over, trying to pinpoint the moment it all began. Was it the first dinner? The first kiss? Had he always been a target? He found himself sitting on a bench at Praça Roosevelt one rainy night, soaked, holding nothing but a crumpled newspaper with Camila's face on the cover. Camila Duarte, Brazil's new business powerhouse. The headline hit harder than any betrayal. She had taken everything from him, and still, the world applauded her. But Alexander was not a man who stayed broken. Not forever. He remembered the words of his father whispered into his ear when he first left home. Even when you lose everything, no one can steal what's in your mind. Alexander repeated it to himself like a prayer as he began to accept a new, brutal reality. He was homeless. He was forgotten. But he still had one thing Camila didn't expect him to keep. His knowledge. and that in time would be enough. From the pinnacle of power to the depths of despair, Alexander's fall was as swift as it was merciless. The cold streets of Sao Paulo welcomed him not with sympathy, but with an indifferent, biting chill. No longer a titan of logistics, no longer the man whose handshake could close million-dollar deals, he was now a shadow of himself, a ghost drifting between the bustling crowds that barely noticed his existence. His sharp suits were gone, replaced by a threadbare jacket scavenged from a donation bin, his polished shoes traded for worn sneakers with holes. The weight of the world pressed down on him, not just physically, but on his spirit. He was invisible. A man who once commanded respect was now just another nameless face in the endless urban tide. In the beginning, the shock numbed him. For days, he wandered without destination, his mind a swirl of disbelief and denial. How had everything crumbled so quickly? How had the woman he trusted become his worst enemy? The sting of betrayal was matched only by the crushing realization that he was utterly alone. His phone, once filled with contacts and business opportunities, was now disconnected. His friends had turned their backs, convinced by Camila's orchestrated lies. The city that once celebrated him now treated him like a pariah. Every glance he caught in shop windows or passing cars reflected a man broken and discarded. Food became a constant challenge. At first, he tried to buy meals, but with no money, he was forced to rely on the generosity of strangers or scavenge leftovers behind restaurants. The humiliation was profound, but hunger was relentless. Nights were colder than he imagined possible. The concrete ground a cruel mattress beneath his aching bones. He huddled under flimsy cardboard boxes or begged for scraps of warmth near subway grates. Sleep came in fits and starts, haunted by nightmares of the life he lost and the woman who stole it. Despite the misery, Alexander's mind refused to shut down. The man who had built an empire from nothing could not let his thoughts dissolve into despair. Instead, he reflected, analyzed, and planned. He reviewed every step that led to his downfall, searching for the cracks in his armor he had overlooked. He questioned his own judgment. How had he missed the signs of Camila's duplicity? The subtle power grabs, the whispered doubts sown in board meetings, the seemingly innocent requests that led to his legal disempowerment. His pride hurt, but the lessons were invaluable. This fall was not the end, it was a painful education. The streets taught him lessons no boardroom ever could. He learned humility in its harshest form, the difference between respect earned and respect lost, the fragility of reputation, but most importantly, he learned resilience. Every day he survived was a small victory. Every moment he resisted giving in to hopelessness was a step toward reclaiming himself. At night, sitting under flickering streetlights, he scribbled ideas on torn scraps of paper salvaged from trash bins. Old business models he once developed, new market trends he had studied, innovative logistics solutions that could disrupt even the most entrenched players. His mind was a forge, heating ideas until they were sharp and ready to strike back. He also observed the streets, the people, the informal economies humming beneath the city's polished surface. How street vendors adapted to competition. How small businesses thrived despite obstacles. He saw opportunities where others saw only struggle. His experience was unique. He understood both the high-stakes corporate world and the gritty realities of survival. This dual perspective would become his greatest weapon. Occasionally, he encountered other homeless people, men and women who had lost everything for various reasons. Some were bitter, others resigned, a few still hopeful. Alexander listened to their stories, learning about pain, endurance, and the will to survive. These interactions grounded him, reminding him that misery was not unique, but so too was the capacity to rise from it. They became silent allies in his solitary battle. One night, while sheltering under an old awning during a relentless rain, he met a former street artist named Miguel, who shared his own story of loss and redemption. Miguel spoke of using creativity and community to rebuild a life shattered by addiction and homelessness. Their conversations rekindled a spark in Alexander, a belief that reinvention was possible even from the depths of despair. The turning point came quietly. One morning, after months of wandering and scraping by, Alexander found himself outside a small, struggling courier company. Its outdated technology and poor management reminded him of the early days of his own empire. He realized then that the knowledge and skills he possessed were still alive inside him, waiting to be unleashed. With nothing left to lose, Alexander began reaching out to former contacts, carefully and discreetly. Some doors closed with a slam, others opened just a crack. Slowly, a fragile network began to form. He used borrowed devices in internet cafes to send emails and draft business plans. Every conversation was a test of his resolve. Every rejection a lesson. Though his body was weakened, his mind was sharper than ever. He refused to be defined by the label of homeless man. He was Alexander Ferraz, a man who had conquered the impossible before and was ready to do it again. The streets had humbled him but had not broken him. As months passed, he saved enough from odd jobs and small loans from sympathetic strangers to rent a modest office space. It was a far cry from his former penthouse suite, but it was a start. His vision, to create a new logistics company, leaner, smarter, more agile, that could compete with Camilla's empire, the same empire that had betrayed him, the same empire that now stood as a monument to everything he lost. The stage was set for a new battle. Alexander wasn't just fighting for money or power anymore. He was fighting for justice, for reclaiming his identity, for proving that no matter how far you fall, you can always rise again. And so, from the cold pavements of São Paulo to the flickering light of his tiny office, Alexander's story of downfall and rebirth was just beginning. The man who once owned everything now had nothing. But soon, the world would learn that even from nothing, a titan could be forged anew. With a modest office and nothing but determination, Alexander Ferraz began to rebuild not just a company, but his entire life. Every fiber of his being was focused on one goal: to create a logistics empire that would rival and eventually eclipse the one Camilla had stolen from him. The man who once commanded boardrooms now commanded his own destiny from a tiny desk littered with notes, financial forecasts, and endless coffee cups. His past experiences were no longer just memories, they were tools sharpened by hardship, ready to carve a new path in an industry he knew inside and out. Alexander's first step was to assemble a lean, trusted team. With limited funds, he sought out talented but overlooked professionals. People disillusioned by big corporations, hungry for innovation and fairness. He offered them not just jobs, but a vision. A vision that transcended mere profits. A company rooted in integrity, agility, and relentless pursuit of excellence. This was not the bloated, slow-moving giant Camilla had built. This was a nimble predator ready to strike. Leveraging technology was essential. Alexander invested countless sleepless nights researching cutting-edge logistics software, automation tools, and data analytics. He partnered with young developers and innovators eager to disrupt the status quo. Every process was scrutinized and optimized to save time and reduce costs. The new company was lean but efficient, driven by data and customer satisfaction rather than greed and politics. Marketing became another battlefield. Alexander used his deep understanding of the industry and market trends to identify underserved niches and customer pain points. His approach was not just about selling a service but building relationships based on trust. He personally reached out to clients, listened to their needs, and adapted his business model accordingly. Word spread quickly. Here was a competitor who understood the challenges of modern logistics and cared about delivering real solutions. Meanwhile, Camilla's empire, once confident and untouchable, began to sense the threat. Her company's aggressive expansion had created vulnerabilities, bureaucratic delays, complacency among staff, and customer dissatisfaction that had been overlooked in the rush for profits. Rumors circulated of her frustration and paranoia as she launched defensive tactics, price wars, exclusive contracts, and even legal intimidation aimed at Alexander's fledgling firm. But Alexander was prepared. Years of corporate battles had taught him resilience and strategic thinking. He responded not with retaliation but with innovation and customer focus. He improved service quality, offered flexible contracts, and introduced sustainable logistics solutions that resonated with a new generation of clients concerned about environmental impact. Slowly but surely, his client base grew, and the company's reputation soared. Financially, the path was rocky. With little capital, Alexander had to rely on strategic partnerships, angel investors, and meticulous budgeting. Every dollar was accounted for, every decision measured for maximum impact. His days were a whirlwind of negotiations, planning, and problem-solving, while his nights remained filled with restless strategizing. Yet, despite the pressure, Alexander felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer a victim. He was a warrior reclaiming his honor and place in the world. His transformation inspired those around him. Employees who once doubted the feasibility of the dream began to believe in the mission. Clients who had abandoned Camilla's company for its cold bureaucracy found a welcoming alternative. Industry analysts started to notice the growing contender, writing cautious praise and questioning the invincibility of the established leader. Alexander had not only rebuilt, he had reinvented what success in logistics meant. Amid this professional revival, Alexander never lost sight of the personal wounds still fresh beneath the surface. The betrayal by Camilla had cut deep, but he channeled that pain into fuel for his relentless climb. Every victory was sweeter knowing it was won against the odds, against the woman who once claimed to love him. He knew the final showdown was approaching, not just a business rivalry but a battle for legacy. And so, with each passing day, Alexander's company grew stronger. He hired more staff, expanded routes, and diversified services. The sleek, modern fleet of trucks he once only dreamed of was now rolling across highways, carrying not just goods but a message: resilience, justice, and rebirth are possible. The underdog was becoming a giant, ready to topple the empire built on deceit. Yet, the journey was far from over. Alexander was well aware that Camilla would not go down without a fight. The stakes were higher than ever, the tension palpable. But if the streets had taught him anything, it was this: true strength lies in adaptability, in the courage to face ruin and rise again. As the sun set on São Paulo, Alexander sat in his modest office, eyes gleaming with determination and quiet satisfaction. The man who had once lost everything was now plotting a comeback that would shake the foundations of the industry and of the life he once knew. The battle for redemption and justice was just beginning, and Alexander was ready to win, no matter the cost. After years of relentless effort, sacrifice, and an unyielding focus on his mission, Alexander Ferraz finally reached the critical point where his company was no longer just a challenger. It was a true threat to Camila Duarte's empire. His competitors had underestimated him, blinded by arrogance and greed, while Alexander quietly and strategically built a foundation strong enough to dismantle their dominance piece by piece. Camilla's company, once the undisputed leader in logistics, began to crumble under the weight of its own mismanagement and aggressive expansion that had alienated key clients and drained resources. Alexander capitalized on every mistake she made. When her suppliers delayed shipments, his company offered faster, more reliable alternatives. When her customer service faltered, he responded with personalized attention and problem-solving that impressed even the most demanding clients. His reputation for honesty and efficiency was spreading like wildfire, pulling market share away from Camilla's business daily. The battle intensified with legal skirmishes and media wars. Camilla, desperate and enraged, resorted to smear campaigns and lawsuits, hoping to suffocate Alexander's rising star. But he was prepared. Every contract, every transaction was impeccably documented, and his transparent operations turned the accusations back on her. The public and clients saw the truth. Here was a man who had fallen to the bottom but refused to stay there, and a woman who had betrayed trust for profit. Financially, Camilla's empire began hemorrhaging. Investors lost faith, stocks plummeted, and creditors tightened their grip. Internal turmoil led to resignations of top executives, and rumors of bankruptcy whispered through the industry. Alexander's company, lean and innovative, thrived in contrast, attracting fresh investment and expanding rapidly into new markets. Then came the final blow. Alexander orchestrated a strategic acquisition of key clients and logistics hubs previously loyal to Camilla, effectively severing her company's lifeline. The news sent shockwaves through the market. Camilla's business declared bankruptcy, assets were liquidated, and the empire she had built on deceit and greed was no more. But victory came with an unexpected cost. The relentless pursuit of revenge and rebuilding had taken a toll on Alexander himself. The late nights, the constant battles, and the emotional scars from betrayal had left him isolated. The world he had fought so hard to reclaim no longer held the same meaning. With his company at its peak but his soul weary, Alexander made a decision that stunned those who knew him. He walked away from the corporate world and returned to the streets, choosing a life stripped of material wealth but rich in newfound wisdom. Now, Alexander lived humbly, not under a cold marquise but in quiet solitude, far from the ruthless games of power. The rise and fall, the glory and the ruin had taught him profound truths. He understood that success is fleeting and that vengeance, while a powerful motivator, cannot fill the void left by genuine connection and peace. His story, however, was far from forgotten. To those who heard it, Alexander's journey became a testament to resilience, the destructive power of betrayal, and the ultimate liberation found in letting go. His life reminded everyone that true strength is not measured by wealth or power but by the courage to start over, again and again, and to find meaning beyond the material. The lesson was clear: no empire, no matter how vast, is worth sacrificing your soul. The real victory lies in rising from the ashes with grace, wisdom, and the humility to embrace life's impermanence.